Captain Lee Daeho stood on the observation deck of the defense station, watching the sunrise paint the sky of New Busan in shades of orange and pink. The planet looked peaceful from up here. Green fields stretched as far as he could see, dotted with small farming towns and mining facilities. It was hard to believe this world had been a dead rock just 20 years ago. The morning air carried the smell of fresh bread from the bakery down in the main settlement. Lee could see people starting their daily work in the fields below. Children ran to school while their parents headed to the mines or the terraforming stations. It was a simple life, but a good one. Beautiful morning, isn't it? Dr. Park So-young joined him at the window. She carried a cup of coffee and looked tired. The terraforming specialist had been working late again, checking the atmospheric processors. Always is on New Busan, Lee replied. How are the processors running? Perfect. The oxygen levels are stable, and the soil is getting richer every month. In 5 more years, we won't need the processors at all. The planet will sustain itself. Park smiled with pride. This was her life's work, Lee nodded. He was proud of what they had built here, too. But his job was different. While Park created life on dead worlds, Lee was supposed to protect it. The problem was there wasn't much to protect it with. His defense fleet consisted of 3 patrol ships and an old cargo hauler they had converted into a gunship. The ships were 20 years old and designed for police work, not war. They could handle pirates or smugglers, but nothing serious. Lee often wondered what would happen if a real threat showed up. Captain Lee to the command center. His communication device crackled. We have a message from Earth Command, Lee sighed. Messages from Earth usually meant more paperwork or new regulations about mining quotas. I'll be right there, he said to Park. Try to get some sleep. You work too hard. The command center was small and cramped. Engineer Kim Woo-bin was already there, checking the communication equipment. Kim was young but skilled. He kept all the colony's systems running smoothly, from the power plants to the defense satellites. What's the message? Lee asked. It's marked routine, sir. New shipping schedules and a request for our monthly resource report. Kim handed him a data pad. Lee scanned through the message. Nothing unusual. New Busan was doing well. They were ahead of schedule on their terraforming goals and had discovered several new mineral deposits. The colony was a success story. Sir, Kim said quietly, there's something else. I picked up some strange signals last night during my equipment check. What kind of signals? Long-range scanner sweeps. Very faint but definitely artificial. Someone was scanning our system. Lee frowned. Pirates? I don't think so. The pattern was too organized, too systematic. Pirates usually just look for easy targets. This was more like a military reconnaissance. Could it be one of our ships? No, sir, I checked with traffic control. No human ships are scheduled in this sector for another month. Lee felt a chill run down his spine. In 20 years of colonial service, he had never encountered a hostile alien species. Humans had found plenty of dead worlds and primitive life, but no advanced civilizations. That didn't mean they weren't out there. Keep monitoring, Lee ordered. If you detect anything else, wake me immediately. The rest of the day passed normally. Lee made his rounds of the defense station, checked in with the patrol ships, and reviewed security reports. Everything was quiet. Maybe Kim had been wrong about the signals. That evening, Lee joined Colony Administrator Choi Hye-jin for dinner in the main settlement. Choi was a small woman with a big personality. She had been with New Busan since the beginning, helping to organize the first colonists and build their new society. The harvest festival is next month, Choi said as they ate. The farmers want to invite the whole sector. It could be our biggest celebration yet. Sounds good, Lee replied, but his mind was elsewhere. He kept thinking about those scanner sweeps. You look worried, Choi observed. Everything okay with the defense grid? Just routine checks, Lee lied. No point in worrying her over what might be nothing. After dinner, Lee walked through the settlement. The streets were quiet now, with most people inside for the evening. Lights glowed in windows, and he could hear families talking and laughing. This was what he was here to protect. His communication device buzzed. It was Kim. Captain, you need to get back here right now. I'm detecting multiple large objects approaching the system. They're not human. Lee ran back to the defense station. In the command center, Kim was staring at his screens with wide eyes. How many? Lee asked. 15 ships, sir? Maybe more. They're big, much bigger than our patrol ships, and they're not trying to hide anymore. Lee studied the scanner display. The approaching fleet was massive. Each ship was at least 3 times the size of his largest vessel. This wasn't a trading mission or a diplomatic contact. This was an invasion force. "Send an emergency signal to Earth Command," Lee ordered. "Tell them we have hostile contact and request immediate assistance." "Already tried, sir. They're jamming our communications." Lee felt his stomach drop. The approaching fleet had been planning this. They knew about human capabilities and had prepared countermeasures. This wasn't a random attack. It was a calculated assault. "Estimated time to arrival?" he asked. 6 hours, sir." Lee looked around the command center at his small crew. Kim was barely out of training. The other technicians were colonists who had volunteered for defense duty. None of them had ever seen real combat. "Wake everyone," Lee said quietly. "All defense personnel, all patrol ships. Begin evacuation procedures for the civilian population." "Sir," Kim asked, "what about our distress beacon, the one that goes straight to the inner systems?" Lee had forgotten about the emergency beacon. It was a direct line to Earth's main defense headquarters, but it was only supposed to be used in extreme situations. Once activated, it would tell Earth Command everything about what was happening here. "Activate it," Lee said. "Send them all our scanner data about these ships. Their size, their weapons, everything we can detect." As Kim worked on the beacon, Lee stared out at the peaceful settlement below. In 6 hours, everything would change. He just hoped that Earth would get their message in time to save the other colonies. The beacon activated with a soft beep. Somewhere in the inner systems, humanity would learn that they were no longer alone in the universe, and that their first contact was not going to be peaceful. "Message sent, sir," Kim reported. "Good," Lee said, watching the enemy fleet grow larger on his screens. "Now let's see what we can do with 3 patrol ships and a prayer." Admiral Krektor stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the human world grow larger on his screens. The planet was green and blue, covered with the strange geometric patterns that humans called farms. It looked weak and defenseless, just as his intelligence reports had predicted. "Status report," Krektor ordered. His voice was deep and rough, like rocks grinding together. "All ships in position, Admiral," replied Tactical Officer Morden. "The humans have 3 small ships moving to intercept us. Their weapons are primitive projectile cannons and basic energy shields." Krektor laughed, showing rows of sharp teeth. The Velcron Empire had conquered dozens of worlds. Their ships carried plasma cannons that could melt through any known armor. Their shields could stop attacks that would destroy mountains. These humans would be easy prey. "Destroy their ships," he commanded. "Leave no survivors." On New Busan, Captain Lee watched his 3 patrol ships race toward the enemy fleet. He knew it was hopeless, but he had to try. Every minute he could delay the attack gave more civilians time to evacuate. "Patrol 1 to Defense Command," came the voice of Captain Han over the radio. "We're engaging the enemy now. Their ships are huge, but maybe we can damage their engines." Lee watched on his screens as the tiny human ships opened fire. Their cannons sent streams of metal bullets toward the enemy vessels. The projectiles struck the alien shields and scattered harmlessly into space. The response was immediate and devastating. Bright beams of energy lanced out from the enemy ships. Patrol 1 vanished in a ball of fire. Patrol 2 tried to dodge, but a second beam cut it in half. Patrol 3 lasted 10 more seconds before it too was destroyed. "All ships destroyed," Kim reported quietly. "No survivors detected." Lee closed his eyes for a moment. He had known those pilots personally. Han had been his friend for 15 years. Now they were all gone, and the enemy fleet hadn't even slowed down. "Time to planet?" Lee asked. 20 minutes, sir." Down in the colony, Dr. Park was helping with the evacuation. The transport ships could only carry a few hundred people at a time, and there were over 10,000 colonists on New Busan. They would never get everyone out in time. "Load the children first," she ordered the transport crews. "Then the elderly and sick. Everyone else will have to find shelter in the emergency bunkers." The bunkers had been built into the hillsides around the settlement. They were designed to protect people from storms or equipment failures, not from orbital bombardment, but they were better than nothing. Park helped carry a young girl onto one of the transport ships. The girl was crying for her parents who had to stay behind. Park promised they would be safe, but she wasn't sure she believed it herself. "Dr. Park," called Engineer Kim over her radio, "I need you at the communication center. We're trying to send as much data as possible to Earth before they jam us completely." Park ran to the communication center, where Kim was frantically working at multiple consoles. Screens showed technical readouts of the approaching alien ships. I'm recording everything, Kim explained. Ship designs, weapon signatures, communication frequencies. If Earth is going to fight these things, they'll need to know what they're up against. How long do we have? Park asked. 5 minutes until they reach orbit. Maybe less. Park looked at the data streaming across the screens. The alien ships were using technology she had never seen before. Their energy signatures were completely different from human designs. But they weren't magic. They were machines built by intelligent beings. That meant they could be understood, and eventually defeated. Make sure you send the biological scans too, she said. I detected traces of their atmosphere when they opened communication channels. Earth will want to know what these creatures need to survive. Above them, the Velcran fleet moved into position around the planet. Admiral Krektor was pleased with how easy this was going. The humans had barely fought back at all. Begin the bombardment, he ordered. Target their military installations first, then their industrial centers. We want the farms intact. The first energy beam struck the defense station. Lee felt the entire structure shake as sections of it vaporized. Emergency lights flickered as power systems failed. Evacuation shuttles are away, Kim reported. Last transport cleared the atmosphere 30 seconds ago. Good, Lee said. Another blast shook the station. Now get to the escape pods. That's an order. Kim hesitated. What about you, sir? Someone needs to keep transmitting data as long as possible. Go. Kim nodded and ran for the escape pod bay. Lee stayed at his station, watching the destruction of everything he had helped build. The enemy beams swept across the planet's surface, destroying roads, power plants, and communication towers. But Lee noticed something interesting. They were being very careful to avoid the farms and the terraforming equipment. They wanted the planet intact. They planned to use it for themselves. Lee coded this observation into his final transmission to Earth, just as another beam struck the command center. The last thing he saw was a wall of fire rushing toward him. On the planet's surface, the remaining colonists huddled in their bunkers as the bombardment continued. Administrator Choi held a group of children close to her as explosions shook the ground above them. Why are they doing this to us? One of the children asked. Choi didn't have an answer. Humans had never encountered hostile aliens before. They had hoped that any intelligent species would be peaceful, like themselves. This attack was proving that hope wrong. The bombardment lasted for 3 hours. When it finally stopped, the Velcran ships began landing troops near the settlements. Tactical Officer Morden led the first wave of soldiers onto the planet's surface. The Velcrans were tall and lizard-like, with scales instead of skin and claws instead of fingernails. They carried energy weapons and wore armor that seemed to shimmer in the light. Morden expected resistance from the surviving humans, but there was almost none. A few colonists tried to fight with farming tools and hunting rifles, but they were quickly overwhelmed. Most humans simply surrendered when they saw the superior firepower arrayed against them. This is too easy, Morden muttered to his sergeant. Where are their soldiers? Their weapons? Their defenses? Maybe this is all they have, the sergeant replied. Maybe humans really are as weak as the report said, but Morden felt uneasy. In his experience, intelligent species didn't spread across multiple star systems without some capacity for violence, yet these humans seemed almost helpless. He watched as his soldiers rounded up the surviving colonists. They would be taken as slaves to work in the Velcran mines and factories. The planet would be strip-mined for its resources, then turned into a military base. Dr. Park was among the captured humans. As the Velcran soldiers forced her toward a transport ship, she managed to catch sight of Engineer Kim hiding behind some debris. Their eyes met for just a moment, and she saw him holding a small communication device. He was still transmitting. Good, she thought. Let Earth know what happened here. Let them know that humanity's peaceful expansion into space had ended with fire and death. The last transport ship lifted off from New Busan, carrying its cargo of human slaves. Behind them, Velcran engineers began studying the terraforming equipment, impressed by its efficiency. This planet would make an excellent addition to their empire. Admiral Krektor was already planning his next move. Intelligence had identified 2 other human colonies within striking distance. They would attack both simultaneously, before word of this victory could spread. On his ship's communication system, a message waited from the Velcran Supreme Chancellor, congratulating him on the easy conquest and authorizing him to expand operations. But Tactical Officer Mordoon remained troubled. As he reviewed the battle recordings, he noticed something strange about the human distress signals. They weren't just calling for help. They were transmitting detailed tactical information about Velcran weapons, shields, and ship configurations. Why would a defeated enemy waste time gathering intelligence, unless they weren't as defeated as they appeared? Morden decided to keep his concerns to himself for now. The Admiral was in a good mood, and questioning a successful operation would be unwise. But he made a note to watch for unusual patterns in future human responses. Meanwhile, traveling faster than light toward the inner systems, the final transmissions from New Busan carried their grim cargo of information. Earth Command would soon learn that humanity was no longer alone in the universe, and they would learn that their first contact had been an act of war. The emergency signal from New Busan reached Earth Command at 0347 hours local time. The massive communication array hidden beneath the Swiss Alps received the transmission and immediately forwarded it to the highest levels of human. Government Admiral Zhang Minho was pulled from his sleep by the harsh buzzing of his emergency communicator. As Supreme Commander of the Human Defense Fleet, he was one of only 12 people in the galaxy authorized to receive direct distress signals from the colonies. "This is Admiral Zhang," he said into the device. "Sir, we have a code black signal from the Outer Rim. Multiple colonies under attack by unknown hostile forces. You need to get to command immediately." Zhang was already pulling on his uniform before the officer finished speaking. Code black meant the worst possible scenario, humanity's first contact with hostile aliens. It was something they had prepared for but hoped would never happen. 20 minutes later, Zhang stood in the war room deep beneath Geneva. The chamber was vast, filled with holographic displays showing every human settlement in known space. 3 of the displays were flashing red: New Busan, Haven's Rest, and Terra Nova. All under attack. General Song Yunji was already there, studying the tactical data. As head of Special Operations Command, she had been analyzing the enemy ships and weapons from the moment the signals arrived. "What do we know?" Zhang asked. "The enemy calls themselves the Velcran Empire," Song replied. "Reptilian species, highly aggressive, superior technology. They've completely destroyed the colonial defense forces and are conducting orbital bombardments." Intelligence Director Bei Jun-seok stepped forward with additional data. "Sir, based on their attack patterns, we estimate the Velcran Empire has been watching us for months, maybe years. This wasn't a random encounter. They planned this carefully." Zhang studied the holographic displays showing the Velcran ships. They were impressive, large, heavily armed, and shielded, but he had seen worse during the development of humanity's own weapon systems. "Recommendations?" he asked. "Full mobilization," Song said immediately. "Deploy the First Fleet and begin evacuation of all remaining Outer Rim colonies." "No," Zhang said quietly. "Not evacuation, preparation." Song and Bei exchanged glances. They had worked with Zhang for years and knew that tone. It meant he was planning something the enemy wouldn't expect. "Sir?" Song asked. Zhang walked to the central display, which showed a map of all human space. The Outer Rim colonies were small dots scattered along the edge of known territory, but behind them in the inner systems lay something very different. "Activate the Ghost Protocol," Zhang ordered. "I want Captain Nam and her squadron ready for deployment within 6 hours. Also, contact the research stations. Tell Dr. Shin to prepare his special projects for field testing." Bei looked confused. "Sir, the Ghost Protocol is still experimental. We've never used it in actual combat. The colonies were never just farming settlements," Zhang explained. "They were early warning systems. We put them out there to see who would attack first. Now we know." Song began to understand. "You're saying we planned for this?" "Humanity has been at war with itself for thousands of years," Zhang said. "We know how to fight. We know how to kill. The peaceful colonies were just the face we chose to show the galaxy, while we built something else back here." The Admiral activated a hidden section of the display. Suddenly, the inner systems lit up with thousands of new contacts: military shipyards, weapons research facilities, training academies, and fleets that had been hidden from even the colonial governments. "How long have we been building this?" Bei asked in amazement. "Since the first colony ship left Earth," Zhang replied. "We hoped we'd never need it. But we prepared for the worst anyway." Captain Nam Da-un was in the middle of a training exercise when the recall order came through. She was piloting an experimental fighter through an asteroid field, testing the ship's new stealth systems. The fighter seemed to phase in and out of existence as it moved. sometimes appearing solid, sometimes becoming completely invisible. Ghost Leader, return to base immediately, came the voice of flight control. This is not a drill. Nam had been expecting this call. The Ghost Squadron had been training for years for a mission they hoped would never come. Now it was time to see if their preparation had been worth it. An hour later, Nam stood in the briefing room with her 11 squadron members. They were the best pilots humanity had ever produced, selected from thousands of candidates and trained in technology that pushed the boundaries of known science. The colonies have been attacked, General Song told them. We're going to hit back, but not the way the enemy expects. Song activated a holographic display showing the Velcran ships. These aliens think they're fighting farmers and miners. They have no idea what humanity is really capable of. You're going to teach them. Nam studied the enemy ship designs. They were large and heavily armed, but they followed conventional military thinking. The Ghost Squadron ships were designed around completely different principles. What are our orders? Nam asked. Hunt them, Song said simply. Make them afraid. Show them that attacking humanity was the worst mistake they ever made. Meanwhile, Dr. Shin Hanul was working frantically in his laboratory beneath the surface of Mars. For 15 years, he had been developing weapons based on human creativity and ruthlessness. Today, those weapons would finally be used. Status report on Project Phantom, he called to his assistant. Quantum tunneling systems are online. The ships can phase through solid matter for up to 30 seconds at a time. Excellent. What about Project Reaper? The adaptive AI weapons are ready. They'll learn enemy defense patterns in real time and modify their attack strategies accordingly. Shin smiled grimly. The Velcrons had superior technology, but they thought in predictable military patterns. Human weapons were designed around chaos, unpredictability, and pure viciousness. Back in the war room, Admiral Zhang was coordinating with commanders across the inner systems. Massive fleets were emerging from hidden bases, ships that had been disguised as asteroids or built inside hollowed-out moons. Sir, Bay reported, we're detecting increased Velcran communications. They're celebrating their easy victories and planning to expand operations. Good, Zhang said. Let them think they've won. The longer they stay confident, the harder they'll fall. What about the colonists? Song asked. The survivors are being taken as slaves. Zhang's expression hardened. We'll get them back. Every single one. And the Velcrons will pay for every moment of suffering they've caused. The Admiral turned to address the entire command staff. Gentlemen, for the first time in 200 years, humanity is going to war. Not against ourselves, but against an enemy that threatened our families and our future. They think they've attacked a weak, peaceful species. They're about to learn what humans are really like when we're angry. Across the inner systems, war machines that had been hidden for decades began to move. The Ghost Squadron prepared for their first mission. Research stations activated weapons that bent the laws of physics. And in classified facilities throughout human space, soldiers who had trained their entire lives for this moment received their orders. The Velcrons had attacked humanity's colonies, thinking they were striking at helpless farmers and miners. What they had really done was wake up a species that had spent centuries perfecting the art of war. Admiral Zhang looked at the tactical displays one more time. The enemy had superior numbers and technology, but they had made one critical mistake. They had assumed that humanity's peaceful exterior represented their true nature. Signal all fleets, Zhang ordered. Operation Retribution is now active. Show them what happens when you attack Earth's children. The war for humanity's survival was about to begin, and the Velcrons were about to discover that they had not conquered a weak species. They had awakened something far more dangerous than they could imagine. Captain Nam Da-un checked her instruments one final time before entering the combat zone. Her fighter's quantum stealth system was fully active, making her ship appear as little more than background radiation to enemy sensors. Behind her, 11 other Ghost Squadron pilots moved through space like deadly shadows. Ghost Leader to all units. Nam whispered into her communicator. Remember, we're not here to win a battle. We're here to start a nightmare. The Velcran fleet around New Busan had settled into a standard occupation pattern. Heavy cruisers maintained orbital positions while smaller ships patrolled the space lanes. It was a textbook deployment, efficient and predictable. That predictability would be their downfall. Pilot Ryu Jae-sung was the first to strike. His fighter materialized directly behind a Velcran patrol ship, seemingly appearing from nothing. Before the enemy could react, Ryu fired a single quantum torpedo. The weapon phased through the patrol ship's shields as if they didn't exist, then materialized inside the vessel's engine core. The patrol ship exploded from within. To the other Velcrans, it looked like their own ship had simply detonated for no reason. What happened to Patrol 7? Commander Goltak demanded from his position aboard the garrison command ship. Unknown, sir, his tactical officer replied. One moment they were on normal patrol. The next moment they were debris. Our sensors detected no weapons fire, no enemy ships. Goltak frowned. Equipment failures were rare in the Velcran fleet, but they did happen. Send Patrol 4 to investigate. Patrol 4 never reached the debris field. Nam herself intercepted them, her fighter phasing in and out of reality as she attacked. Her weapons seemed to bend space itself, striking from impossible angles. The Velcran ship tried to return fire, but their targeting systems couldn't lock onto something that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Within minutes, Patrol 4 was also destroyed. This time, the other Velcran ships detected brief energy signatures, but nothing that matched any known weapon system. Sir, the tactical officer's voice was strained. We may have a problem. On New Busan's surface, Colonel Oh Sungmin watched the explosions in orbit through his binoculars. His Special Forces team had been inserted onto the planet 3 hours ago, using stealth pods that the Velcrans couldn't detect. Now they were positioned around the main Velcran garrison, ready to begin their own campaign of terror. Teams 2 and 3, begin Phase 1. Oh whispered into his radio. Remember, we want survivors. Scared survivors who can tell stories. The Velcran soldiers on night patrol never saw the humans coming. One moment they were walking their assigned routes. The next moment they were unconscious, dragged into the darkness by figures that moved like ghosts through the terrain. When the patrol failed to report in, Goltak sent a search team. They found only empty armor and strange symbols carved into nearby trees. The symbols meant nothing to the Velcrans, but they were clearly deliberate messages. What kind of primitive species leaves cave paintings? Goltak muttered. He didn't understand that the symbols weren't primitive art. They were psychological warfare, designed to make the enemy feel like they were being hunted by something ancient and implacable. Dr. Shin Hanil monitored the battle from his command center on Mars. His experimental weapons were performing perfectly. The quantum torpedoes were phasing through shields as designed, while the adaptive AI systems were learning Velcran defense patterns faster than the enemy could change them. Sir, his assistant reported, the Ghost Squadron has destroyed 8 enemy ships without taking any casualties. The Velcrans are starting to group their remaining patrols together. Exactly as predicted, Shin smiled. They're responding to an unknown threat by using standard military tactics. Time to show them why that won't work. Shin activated a new weapon system he had been saving for this moment. A swarm of microscopic drones, invisible to conventional sensors, began moving toward the grouped Velcran ships. Each drone carried a small quantum explosive, designed to detonate inside enemy hulls. Commander Goltak was beginning to panic. Half his patrol fleet had been destroyed by an enemy he couldn't see or understand. His remaining ships were clustered together for mutual protection, but somehow the attacks were continuing. Sir, we're detecting strange readings from our own ships, his technical officer reported. It's almost like something is moving through our hulls. That's impossible, Goltak snapped. Our armor is solid duranium. Nothing can pass through it. The technical officer's screen suddenly flashed red. Sir, I'm reading micro-explosions throughout the fleet. Something is attacking us from inside our own ships. Goltak watched in horror as his carefully arranged formation began to break apart. Ships that should have been safe behind meters of armor were suffering internal explosions. Emergency alarms sounded throughout his command vessel. On the planet below, Colonel O's teams had moved to Phase 2 of their operation. Instead of just eliminating Velcran patrols, they were now conducting precision strikes against supply convoys and communication arrays. The attacks followed no pattern the Velcrans could understand. Sometimes entire convoys would vanish without a trace. Other times the vehicles would be found empty, their crews missing. Worst of all were the convoys that arrived at their destinations, carrying only the armor of their former occupants. Neatly stacked and arranged. They're playing with us, Tactical Officer Morden observed when he arrived to investigate the latest incident. This isn't random violence, it's calculated psychological warfare. Morden had been studying human military history since the attack began. What he found disturbed him greatly. These creatures had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of killing their own kind. They understood fear, terror, and intimidation in ways the Velcrans never had. "Sir," he reported to Admiral Krektor, "I believe we may have underestimated the humans." "Impossible," Krektor replied from orbit. "Our intelligence is perfect. Humans are a weak species that depends on farming and mining. They have no significant military capability." "Then how do you explain what's happening to our forces?" Krektor had no answer. In 3 days of occupation, he had lost more ships and soldiers than in the previous year of conquest. And he still had no idea what was attacking them. Back on New Busan, the human resistance was growing stronger. Dr. Park had been working with other captured scientists to sabotage Velcron equipment. They moved carefully, making small changes that would cause failures days or weeks later. Engineer Kim had established a hidden communication network using equipment the Velcrans didn't know existed. He was coordinating with Colonel O's teams and passing intelligence about enemy movements and weaknesses. "The Velcrans are scared," Kim reported during a secret meeting. "Their soldiers are refusing to go on solo patrols. They're sleeping in groups and posting multiple guards." "Good," Park replied. "Fear makes them sloppy. The more afraid they get, the more mistakes they'll make." But the humans weren't just fighting on New Busan. Similar operations were underway on Haven's Rest and Terra Nova. Special Forces teams were conducting the same psychological warfare campaigns, while Ghost Squadron fighters hunted enemy ships throughout all 3 systems. Yoon Taiwu, one of the survivors who had escaped in the initial evacuation, was now working with Intelligence Director Bay to coordinate the resistance efforts. His first-hand knowledge of Velcran tactics was proving invaluable. "They follow rigid military doctrine," Yoon explained during a strategy meeting. "They expect their enemies to do the same. But humans don't fight like that. We adapt, improvise, and break the rules." "Exactly," Bay agreed. "That's why this is working. The Velcrans are trying to fight a conventional war against an unconventional enemy." As the days passed, the Velcran occupation forces became increasingly paranoid and desperate. They knew they were being hunted, but they couldn't understand by what or how many. Every shadow might hide an enemy. Every equipment failure might be sabotage. Admiral Krektor finally sent a message to the Velcran homeworlds, requesting reinforcements. For the first time in his military career, he was admitting that he might not be able to complete a mission. But the reinforcements would take weeks to arrive. And every day they waited, the mysterious human attacks grew more sophisticated and more terrifying. Commander Goltok stood in his command center, looking at reports of the latest incidents. 3 more patrols had vanished. A supply depot had been found empty except for a single human message scratched into the wall. "We are coming." "Sir," his communications officer called out. "We're receiving a transmission from the human resistance." "Put it through," Goltok ordered. A voice spoke in accented but clear Velcron. "Commander Goltok, you attacked our homes. You enslaved our people. You thought we were weak. You were wrong. This is only the beginning. We know where you sleep. We know where you eat. We know where you hide. And we are coming for all of you." The transmission ended, leaving the command center in silence. Goltok realized that his greatest fear was coming true. He wasn't fighting farmers and miners anymore. He was fighting something that had turned war into an art form. And they were just getting started. Admiral Jang Minho stood on the bridge of the HSS Retribution, watching the Velcran fleet through the main display. After weeks of preparation, the human main fleet had finally arrived at New Busan. But this would not be the kind of battle the Velcrans expected. "Signal from Ghost Squadron," reported Communications Officer Lee Young-soo. "Captain Nam reports all enemy patrol ships have been eliminated. The Velcrans have pulled their remaining forces into a defensive formation around the planet." "Perfect," Young replied. "They're exactly where we want them." The Velcran fleet looked impressive. Massive ships arranged in overlapping defensive patterns, their weapons trained on the approaching human vessels. Admiral Krektor was confident that his superior firepower would finally crush these mysterious attackers. "Human fleet approaching," Tactical Officer Morden reported. 30 ships, smaller than ours but advancing in formation. "Finally," Krektor said with satisfaction. "A real battle instead of these cowardly sneak attacks." "Open fire when they enter range. What Krektor? didn't know was that half the ships he was seeing weren't real. Dr. Shin's holographic projectors were creating phantom vessels to confuse enemy targeting systems. The real human ships were using stealth technology that made them nearly invisible. All ships, begin Phase 1, Zhang ordered. The human fleet suddenly scattered in all directions, moving in patterns that seemed impossible. Some ships appeared to split into multiple copies of themselves. Others vanished completely, only to reappear behind the Velcran formation. What's happening? Krektor demanded. Where did they go? I don't know, sir, Morden replied, staring at his instruments in confusion. Our sensors are detecting ships everywhere and nowhere at the same time. The first human attack came from directly above the Velcran fleet. The HSS Vengeance materialized out of empty space and fired a single weapon. But this wasn't an ordinary torpedo or energy beam. It was Dr. Shin's latest creation, a quantum disruptor that could exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The weapon struck the Velcran flagship's shields and seemed to bounce off harmlessly. Then it reappeared inside the ship's hull, then outside again, then in the engine room, then in the bridge. The flagship's defenses couldn't stop something that existed everywhere and nowhere at once. Krektor watched in horror as his most powerful ship was torn apart from within by a weapon he couldn't understand. Return fire! Destroy them all! The Velcran fleet opened up with everything they had. Plasma beams and missile swarms filled space with deadly energy. But the human ships seemed to dance between the attacks, sometimes becoming transparent, sometimes splitting into multiple targets, sometimes simply vanishing. Captain Nam's Ghost Squadron joined the battle, their fighters phasing in and out of reality as they struck at the larger Velcran vessels. Each attack was precise and devastating, targeting critical systems with weapons that ignored conventional defenses. Sir, Morden reported, his voice shaking. We've lost 8 ships and haven't managed to destroy a single human vessel. Their technology is beyond anything in our databases. But the space battle was only part of the human plan. On New Busan's surface, Colonel O's Special Forces teams launched their final assault on the Velcran ground forces. The attack came from everywhere at once. Human soldiers seemed to emerge from the ground itself, using tunnel systems they had secretly built during the occupation. Their weapons were specifically designed to counter Velcran armor and shields. Commander Goltak found himself trapped in his command bunker as explosions rocked the facility. How did they get so close? Where are our perimeter guards? Gone, sir, his aide reported. All our outer positions have been overrun. The humans are using weapons we've never seen before. Through the bunker's monitors, Goltak could see human soldiers moving through his base with terrifying efficiency. They weren't just attacking randomly. They knew exactly where every Velcran position was located, as if they had been watching and planning for weeks. Dr. Park and Engineer Kim had emerged from hiding to join the assault. They carried modified mining equipment that had been converted into weapons, along with detailed maps of every Velcran installation on the planet. This is for Captain Lee, Park whispered as she activated a device that sent feedback through the Velcran communication network, overloading their systems. In space, Admiral Zhang was coordinating the final phase of the battle. The Velcran fleet was in complete disarray, their ships scattered and burning. But Yang wanted more than just victory. He wanted to send a message to the entire galaxy. Open a channel to all Velcran ships, he ordered, and broadcast this throughout their empire. The transmission reached not just the dying fleet, but Velcran colonies and military bases across dozens of star systems. Yang's image appeared on their screens, calm, professional, and absolutely terrifying in its restraint. I am Admiral Zhang Minho of the Human Defense Fleet, he began. You attacked our colonies. You enslaved our people. You thought we were weak. You were wrong. As he spoke, the displays showed the systematic destruction of the Velcran fleet. Ship after ship was disabled or destroyed by weapons the Velcrans couldn't comprehend or counter. This is what happens when you attack humanity, Zhang continued. We are not farmers or miners. We are the children of a world that spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of war. We hoped we would never need those skills again. You have proven us wrong. On the Velcran homeworld, Supreme Chancellor Vorthak watched the transmission with growing horror. His most powerful fleet was being destroyed by creatures his intelligence services had dismissed as primitive. How is this possible? Sir, his military advisor said quietly. Perhaps we should attempt to negotiate. Negotiate? Forthak roared. With these animals? Sir, the advisor continued, they've demonstrated technological capabilities we don't understand. Their weapons ignore our shields. Their ships seem to exist in multiple dimensions, and according to our intelligence network, they have fleets hidden throughout their territory that we never detected. Back at New Busan, the ground battle was ending as decisively as the space engagement. Velcran forces were surrendering in groups, overwhelmed by human tactics they couldn't counter. Colonel O accepted the surrender of Commander Goltak personally. The Velcran commander looked broken, defeated not just militarily but psychologically. How? Goltak asked. How did weak farmers and miners become this? We were never farmers and miners, O replied. We were soldiers pretending to be farmers and miners. The colonies were bait. We wanted to see who would attack first. Impossible. Your intelligence saw what we wanted you to see. Humans have been preparing for this war. Since we first left Earth, we just hoped we'd never have to fight it. The final phase of Operation Retribution was the liberation of the human prisoners. Dr. Park led the rescue teams to the slave camps, where thousands of colonists had been held in terrible conditions. Engineer Kim was among the first to be freed. Dr. Park, you're alive! We all are, Park replied. And we're going home. But the victory at New Busan was just the beginning. Similar battles were being fought at Haven's Rest and Terra Nova, with identical results. The Velcron Empire's occupation forces were being systematically destroyed by an enemy they had never understood. Admiral Zhang's final transmission was broadcast throughout the galaxy, not just to Velcran space. Every known alien civilization received the message, along with detailed recordings of the battle. Let this be a lesson to all who might consider attacking humanity, Zhang said. We are a peaceful species. We prefer to build rather than destroy, to create rather than conquer. But if you threaten our families, our homes, our future, you will discover that peace is a choice we make, not a weakness we suffer from. The transmission ended with images of the Velcran fleet's destruction and a simple message that appeared in hundreds of languages. Humanity protects its own. In the days that followed, alien governments across the galaxy began revising their policies toward humans. Trade delegations were hastily organized. Diplomatic communications increased dramatically, and military plans that had targeted human colonies were quietly filed away. The Velcran Empire sued for peace within a week, offering to return all human prisoners and pay massive reparations. Admiral Zhang accepted their surrender, but with conditions. The Velcrons would be monitored for the next century to ensure they never again attacked peaceful worlds. On New Busan, the colonists returned to their farms and mines, but the planet was different now. Hidden beneath the peaceful surface were defensive systems that could repel any invasion. The lesson had been learned. Peace required the ability to defend it. Dr. Park stood in her rebuilt laboratory, watching the sunset through her window. The sky was the same beautiful orange and pink it had always been, but she knew that human space was no longer the quiet, defenseless frontier it had once been. Engineer Kim joined her, carrying a communication device. Message from Earth Command, he said. They're sending more ships to patrol the outer rim. No colony will ever be defenseless again. Good, Park replied. But I hope we never have to use them. She looked up at the stars, knowing that somewhere among them, other species were watching and learning. The galaxy had discovered that humanity was not the weak, peaceful species they had appeared to be. They were something far more.